Excellencies, colleagues, friends, Prime Minister. It is an indisputable fact that 5 years after the intervention into Georgia, Russia has again violated all international norms and agreements by invading Ukraine. Russia's aim is to draw new borders in the thoughts and understanding of the people. The drawing borders on the continent cannot be final until it has not been fixed in people's memory. I will give you an example from my homeland, the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. You may remember that there was such a virtual notion. Could be part of the Soviet Union of some maps for 50 years. But the independent and democratic Republic of Estonia existed in the minds of the citizens of Estonia, and it had firm borders with communist Russia. Therefore, the restoration of the independence of Estonia was a very natural process. For Estonia, the choices in the contemporary world have actually been simple. In order to be successful as a nation and as a country, we have integrated and then integrated and then integrated once again. What would be the alternative? If we did not belong to NATO and the European Union, we would be just a small nut between two large stones. And if these stones moved for some reason, we would become nothing but dust that the wind carries away. In the beginning of the 90s, there was a sincere belief that a large part of the nations of Europe are finally free to decide and act by themselves. But in some countries, becoming free of the change turned out to be not just complicated, but very complicated. A leader that would decide and take responsibility was expected to rise again. A leader who would restore lost faith. Why did it go that way? I think it's a key issue. I personally believe that everything depended on whether democracy and its institutions, political parties, for example, could be higher than different interests in the society. In some places, the interests overrode both the political parties and the parliaments, and the people hoped for a great leader who would restore order. Sounds cruel, but essentially it means returning into chains, or from a colorful world into black-white again. The collapse of repressive regime does not in itself give for us open society. Moving on that direction requires an aware change, of course, and a long-time commitment. Sometimes you need to do even unpopular things. For example, in Estonia, we finance political parties from the state budget. If you think it's a popular thing, no way, never. But after this simple movement in our legislation, we find our democracy much more understandable and much more strong. The promise of not using military force against another country does not cost anything if it's in conflict with the interest of the regime. At the same time, the democratic world does not respond to such behavior by one-sided cancellation of agreements. It follows these agreements even when it has, for example, in its promise to the Baltic states, by the way, replaced the words "not permanently" with the words "rotational persistent presence." Democratic states based on the rule of law and cannot behave otherwise. We have nice cooperation with Baltic states and Nordic states in the field of EU Eastern Partnership. You know, all the Nordic states are not members in the EU, and all of them are not members in the NATO. And in this meeting of speakers of the parliament, I feel myself like with my friends, with the people who are thinking in the same way. But I feel sometimes disturbed. It happens when, for example, the Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe, speakers meeting, and we are discussing the issue security and democracy. And I am the 10th speaker who goes to the stage to speak, and I am the first who use the words Ukraine, Crimea, Russia. Or I have to present an appeal to the colleagues at the meeting of the speakers of the national parliaments of the European Union to approve the association agreements with Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia as soon as possible. Already for some time, the greatest conflict is between open and closed views of the world, I think. We can see that conflict in the relations between the states. We must say openly that we can see it inside the states, in conflicts based on religion, for example. The open world is democratic, respects people and the freedoms, is tolerant, acknowledges both victories and losses. In the closed world, there are only victories, and these victories are used to convince people into believing that those who are different must be enemies. If you remember such a thing like Homo Sovieticus, they just have enemies. Finally, my friends, I would say that the politicians in Ukraine, Estonia, in Lithuania, maybe we are not so experienced, but maybe sometimes too frank. And we are not afraid to use the word war, for example. In the same time, we know a lot of politicians in Europe who anyhow don't want to say war. Okay, if it's not war, then it's, on my mind, it's no peace. And if we can say nowadays openly that in Ukraine it's a war, then this war in Ukraine is also no peace between open and closed societies, between democracy and autocratical regimes, between free media and between brainwash, between free, happy people and between to be a slave. I think if we are looking to all new agreements, and I hope all the European Union national parliaments will adopt them. I was asked a few years ago in Moldova to explain very simply to the people. And I explain it in a way that you are staying on the road and you don't know where to go. And there is written university and there is written Kulak, where you are going then. And let me finalize with one sentence of my favorite artist and musician, Frank Zappa. He said, "Your mind is like a parachute. It works better if you open it."